Welcome back to The Report. A recent article published in Smithsonian Magazine claimed that mammals evolved in just 9 evolutionary steps. From reptilian jawbones transforming into mammalian ear bones to the rise of fur and milk glands. You know, the problem? Evolutionary theory often presents these complex transitions as if they're simply a series of small steps. But when we look at the biological details, these changes, they require multiple interdependent systems that really have to function together from the very start. For example, one of the key claims in the article is that the tiny bones in our middle ear, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, well, those just evolved from reptilian jawbones. Now, this is taught as fact in many textbooks, but how much of it is based on actual evidence, and how much of this is just wishful storytelling? Are these features really the result of a slow step-by-step process, or do they point to intelligent design that couldn't have emerged simply through gradual evolution? To help us analyze these claims, we're joined by Professor Stuart Burgess. Dr. Burgess is Professor of Engineering Design at Bristol University, UK, and Liberty University in the US, and has published over 200 scientific papers on design and engineering and biology. Now, he's led the design of the chain drive for the British Olympic cycling team for the last 3 Olympics and exhibited this work at the Royal Society in London. Stuart has received several national and international awards for design, including the top mechanical engineering prize in the UK. Dr. Burgess, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Listen, you've published over 200 scientific papers on engineering, design, and biomechanics. What kind of different projects have you worked on and studied?
Yeah, I've mainly worked on bio-inspired design. Just to give you one example, producing a dragonfly-inspired micro air vehicle for the Ministry of Defence. Also some bio-inspired prosthetic joints for knees and feet and ankles. It's been great fun, but also very encouraging, showing that science supports the Bible. And interestingly, the engineering we see in biology is always superior to that we see in engineering.
And that's no surprise. The engineering that we see within biology so much exceeds anything that we can come up with. And that's the idea of biomimicry, that we would actually mimic biological devices or systems to try to accomplish things that, well, these creatures, they've been able to accomplish very well since they were created. But this Smithsonian article right here, How to Make a Mammal in 9 Evolutionary Steps. So basically, they're claiming this is the recipe for biological life right here. What were some of the main claims that were proposed in this new article?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the good things about the article was that it did acknowledge that there's a huge difference between reptiles and mammals. So it highlighted these major differences: 4 in the head, ear bones, eye bones, teeth and palate, 4 in the body, walking posture, ribs, furry, skin and milk glands. So that was one good thing, but it claimed that it wasn't really difficult to imagine how a reptile could evolve into a mammal. But actually, when you look at the article, whilst it was saying, of course, a mammal needs these things, it was never giving any detail on how some of those things could have evolved. And one thing I found slightly humorous about the article, it kept using the word shifted. So it said, over time, reptile jaws shifted in shape. Over time, lizard skin shifted to smoother skin. Lower walking postures shifted. In fact, if you do a word search, the word shifted appears 9 times. Now, I don't know about the USA, but in Great Britain, the word shifty is a bit of a dubious word used for people who are not really sure what they're talking about. So I found that aspect quite humorous.
It is. So this is the scientific method that they use to determine all of this is, oh, it just shifted. Now, again,
Exactly.
we're talking about a layman's article at this point. So perhaps there are some underlying theories beyond that, but they are making statements here. Again, as I was browsing the article, I found the word "in fact." Many of the key features that make us mammals evolved even before the dinosaurs. In fact, They're making fact-based statements without backing it up with scientific observation. And one of the biggest claims that you'll find in evolutionary textbooks today, Stuart, is the mammalian middle ear bones, right? The hammer, the anvil, the stirrup, evolving somehow from reptilian jaw bones. And that's even taught in some high school biology classes. So our young people are specifically or particularly exposed to this particular argument. What do you make of that theory?
Yeah, it's quite an iconic theory, isn't it? And, it makes it sound so plausible, and people say, well, this is a good theory. But as soon as you look in the detail, you can see that it's not a strong theory at all. One of the problems is the bones in the middle ear are very, very precise. So it's all very well saying this bone shifted from the jawbone of a reptile. But the bones have this precision design, and not only are the bones very precise, but there aren't just bones in the middle ear. There are at least 4 precision ligaments and 2 precision muscles. So there are at least 9 precision components. So when they say, well, 2 bones added to the single bone of a reptile ear, they're leaving out at least 6 other components. And not only that, but those 3 bones form a complex linkage mechanism. In engineering, engineers know that if you have a complex linkage system, like a car steering system or a car suspension system, those systems are irreducibly complex with lots of levers, springs, and hinges. And that is exactly what we have in the middle ear. In fact, the middle ear is so complex, researchers still haven't figured out the complexity of that mechanism. So the idea that you just have to explain how 3 bones got together in the middle ear, that's just far too simplistic.
Stuart, they just shifted.
Yeah, I mean, imagine I said to you, I could evolve a sundial into a Rolex watch.
Yeah.
Now, a sundial has a pointer and it has a clock face, and a watch has a pointer and a clock face. So why can't I evolve a sundial into a watch? Well, you're going to say to me, hang on, Stuart, inside a Rolex watch, you have these incredible gears and bearings and springs. As soon as you think of that, then you see it's impossible to do that. But that's exactly what the evolutionist is doing. When they're comparing a reptile to a mammal ear, it's like comparing a sundial to a Rolex watch. So it's all very well showing how a bone shifted, but you haven't explained that complex mechanism.
Right, right. Another major thing the article didn't mention was the cardiovascular system. Mammals have 4-chambered hearts, while these reptiles have 3-chambered. It claims that somehow mammals developed milk glands, developed fur. It doesn't really touch on the origin or how somehow this happened, just simply that it had to have shifted in some way. Now, you recently published a paper in a top secular journal that challenged the Darwinian concept of homology and vertebrate limb patterns, and I really appreciate your research. Can you share just a little bit about that and how it's challenging past evolutionary assumptions?
Yeah, Darwin's homology argument is very famous, where he looks at the vertebrate limb pattern in a mammal, a reptile, an amphibian, a bird, and he said, if you look at, say, a whale flipper, why would a whale need an elbow and a wrist and fingers? Only evolution can explain that. And this is supposedly the greatest evidence for evolution. But I have written a paper showing that a whale does actually need a wrist joint, an elbow joint, and finger joints for hydrodynamic reasons. Now, of course, Charles Darwin didn't understand hydrodynamics of the way whales swim in the water, and he didn't understand the aerodynamics of a bird wing. But I published a paper, and even the title challenges Darwin's homology argument, because he said there is not universal optimal design. But Christians have always said common design comes from a common designer. But what my paper is showing is that there are scientific reasons for having that common design. And within that paper, I even said this challenges Darwin's homology argument. And I was very surprised and very encouraged that the scientific journal, the Institute of Physics in the UK, actually published the paper.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really encouraging. You actually have interacted with many of your colleagues in academia, in universities, and many of them that you're working with don't look at Christianity as being valid, or they don't look at design concepts as being valid. Some of them may be on the fence about these things, and certainly that's got to be challenging in some ways, but how have you been able to navigate that in the last few seconds?
Yeah, I've been in academia 30 years. My biggest surprise is that most academics are agnostic. And I've been so surprised. Many biologists come up to me and they say, actually, they don't have confidence in the theory of evolution, but they won't mention that publicly. Otherwise, it could affect their career. And I found this so encouraging that it's hard to find a biologist who's actually confident in the theory of evolution. So that's been really encouraging, and my own university has supported me in my freedom of speech. So I've personally had good experience in academia.
That's great. That is fantastic. Again, the more that you research, it is hard to deny that there are design components in place, and design typically implies a designer. Stuart Burgess, thank you so much for joining me today and for breaking this article down.
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Thank you.
It is great to be with you as well. And that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. And until next week, keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.